Welcome back to part 2. I am reading the actual words from a Gettysburg newspapers about the aftermath of the battle. The rebels in Gettysburg. The rebels entered Gettysburg in force about 4 o'clock on Friday last. The advance consisted of 200 of White's mounted guerrillas who charged up Chambersburg Street in the most terrific manner, yelling like demons and firing their revolvers as they passed through the town. These were followed by 3 regiments of infantry, 2 from Louisiana and 1 from Georgia. The guerrillas dashed out of town for several miles along the principal roads in the pursuit of citizens who were leaving for other parts. They overtook quite a number and turned them back, and after taking their horses, let them off. Unfortunately for ourselves, we fell into their hands, but by one of those strategical movements so common in war times, we made our escape. They encamped about 1.5 miles from town, part of them to the north and part to the east, while a considerable number remained in town, taking possession of the courthouse. They'd done no considerable damage to private property, and the only annoyance our citizens experienced was their hated presence and their calls for something to eat. They searched all the stores and warehouses and took what they pleased, and as much of it as they wanted. Those that were not open they broke into, and done it with the cool assurance that they would respect private property. The railroad bridge across Rock Creek was soon set on fire, and whilst in a blaze, a number of cars were ignited and started down the track, but they passed over the bridge and were consumed just beyond. Altogether, we are told that 17 cars were burnt. Our citizens have now had a sight of the rebel army. Among them were a few intelligent men, but upon the whole, a more ragged, dirty, lousy-looking crowd we never beheld. This, added to the fact that they are rebels against the best government ever established, should consign them not only to everlasting contempt of the whole world, but to those regions which seem to have been prepared expressly for Jeff Davis and his followers. In consequence of the terrible excitement to which we were subjected last week, we were compelled to suspend the publication of our paper. Just as we were ready to go to press on Wednesday, the most terrific battle of the war commenced, and a few hours after the rebel army had possession of Gettysburg and held it until Saturday morning. During that time, they had possession of our office and freely used our type and press to print their army blanks. In order that our subscribers may not be the losers by this unfortunate occurrence, we this week issue what might be called a double sheet. The sick and wounded. Our town is one vast hospital filled with the wounded in recent battles. The churches, courthouse, warehouses, college, seminary, and many of the private houses are filled. Many of the barns and houses for miles around town are filled with thousands of wounded, mostly rebels. The rebel army, in its hasty retreat, left thousands behind. Every attention in the power of our people is being bestowed upon these unfortunate sufferers. Our enemies, as well as our friends, receive mercy at the hands of the loyal. The cars commenced running again as far as the Rock Creek Bridge on Tuesday, all the bridges except this one having been repaired. The telegraph is also in operation, but both the railroad and telegraph are used entirely for military purposes. Several of our citizens were severely wounded by the bullets from the sharpshooters During the 3 days of fighting, it was not safe to be on the street for a moment. The rebel sharpshooters were posted in every alley and in many of the houses, picking off our men and horses, while ours were returning the compliment with effect. Soldiers and horses were shot dead on the street. John L. Burns. On Wednesday, after the battle commenced, John L. Burns, an old citizen of this place, shouldered his musket and went out by himself to meet the rebels. He advanced to the hottest of the scene and blazed away with his old musket until he fell, wounded in the leg, side, and arm. He reached his home, and though severely wounded, it is hoped he will soon recover. Patriotism and bravery like this is worthy of record in the annals of war. To all citizens, men, horses, and wagons wanted immediately to bury the dead and to cleanse our streets in a thorough way as to guard against pestilence. Every good citizen can be of use by reporting himself at once to Captain W. W. Smith, Acting Provost Marshal, Office, NL Corner Central Square. The rebels tired of war. We have talked with multitudes of the rebel soldiers and find very many heartily sick of the war. They acknowledge themselves badly whipped and seem desirous of finding a quiet home beneath the protection of the Stars and Stripes. Our town. Our citizens would scarcely recognize their own town were it not that the outside walls still present a familiar sight. The rebels held the town from Wednesday afternoon until Saturday morning, and during that time the work of destruction went on without intermission. Every store in the town was completely gutted, and many private houses were completely sacked. What they could not carry away they destroyed, and we firmly believe that if they had remained much longer, not one stone would have been left upon another, and the people left to starve. As it was, many families were left without a mouthful to eat or any clothes except what was on their backs for several days, and even yet it is difficult to obtain supplies. The rebels, during their short occupancy of our town, failed to do a single act that we know of to place us under obligations to them. After using our press and ink, they wrecked a great deal of our type. They next gutted our house from cellar to garret, leaving us nothing to eat, nothing to wear, nothing to sleep on, and left without thanking us. We have only suffered in common with our neighbors, nearly all of whom were treated in the same way. We cheerfully submit to the temporary inconvenience and find ample consolation in the thought that this army of thieves and murderers were soundly thrashed for their misbehavior.